Hi everybody, my name's Mike and welcome to this first video in the Getting Started series. In this lesson I shall give you a complete guide to buying your first guitar. Now when you first walk into a music shop or start looking online, it can get very confusing, especially nowadays as there's just so much to choose from. So if you're unsure about what to go for, then stay tuned. Deciding on whether to go for an electric or an acoustic ultimately comes down to one factor, the type of music that you want to play. So if you want to play rock, then go for an electric. If you like styles such as pop, folk, country or singer-songwriter styles, then go for a steel string acoustic. And for those of you who wish to play classical, then a nylon string acoustic will be the sound to go for. Now while this may seem like a very simple way to decide, you might find you'll have more motivation to pick the guitar up and practice if you've chosen your guitar based on the sound that inspired you to learn. Now, if you haven't quite got your dream guitar just yet, that doesn't mean that you can't get started. So for you guys that are thinking about going for an acoustic guitar, the first thing to be aware of is that there are two main types, steel string and nylon string. Now, as you've probably guessed, the main difference between the two is the type of strings. Now, a nylon string acoustic is mainly meant for playing classical as it has a softer sound, and the strings are a little bit easier on the tips of your fingers, but it does have a slightly wider neck than other guitars, so when you first start to learn it might be a little bit more of a stretch. Now, a steel string acoustic on the other hand has a sharper sound and is more suited to kind of pop, country, folk kind of styles. Now while the neck isn't quite as wide as a nylon string acoustic, the strings are going to be a little bit tougher on the tips of your fingers, but with regular practice you'll soon get used to it. Brands I could recommend, a great place to start for a steel string acoustic would be a Yamaha F310. For the money, for around about £100, these are great. Good build quality, plays really well, sounds really good, and you get a few little extra bits to help you along the way as well, such as spare strings, extra picks, a stand, and I think you get a carrying case as well with it. Also, you could go for a Fender acoustic starter pack, similar sort of thing. But if you want to spend a little bit more money, I could recommend going for a Chinese brand of guitar called Vila. Now these are around about £160 to £170, and for the money they're fantastic. Sound really bright, plays really well, and I've taught quite a lot of people that have had these as their first guitar and they've been more than happy. Now when going for an electric guitar, I'd recommend going for a Yamaha Pacifica. Again, really good build quality, sounds really good and plays really well. Fender Squiers are also a good place to start as well. Now whichever electric guitar you decide to go for, the one thing to look out for is what type of bridge the guitar has. Now the bridge is what's holding the strings in place at the lower end of the body, just here. Now you want to go for either a fixed bridge or a vintage tremolo bridge, as these are really secure, really stable. Things like tuning and changing strings are relatively straightforward. Now the other type of bridge that you could go for is what they call a floating tremolo bridge. Now you can get some really cool sounds out of one of these, but for beginners are an absolute nightmare, as changing strings and tuning can be a real problem. So just keep it simple, go for a fixed bridge or a vintage tremolo bridge. Amp wise, a small 15-20 watt solid state practice amp would do the job. Brands such as Marshall, Peavey have some really good ones out there, and for a little bit more money, Line 6 have some great amps too. Now one quick tip, it's probably best at this stage to avoid buying a valve amp. Now valve amps are meant to be driven at high volumes, so they're not really suitable for practicing at home, and they're usually quite expensive as well. And now for some technical stuff. No matter which guitar you decide to go for, whether it's an acoustic or an electric or whichever brand you've decided on, one very important factor is the action. Now the action is the distance between the fingerboard and the strings. So if a guitar has a very high action, where the distance between the fingerboard and the strings is very high, you will need a lot more pressure with the fingers on your left hand to produce a nice clear sound. Now if you go for a guitar with a low action, where the distance between the fingerboard and the strings is nice and low, you won't need as much pressure, therefore it'll be a lot easier to get that nice clear sound. So go for a guitar with a nice low action. Okay, so there we have it. I hope that's given you a good idea about what to look out for when you buy your first guitar. For more information, head over to my website mikeguitarlessons.com, and in next lesson we shall be looking at guitar anatomy. So until then, take care, bye for now.